Hey everyone, it's Dragon Rider, and we are getting into more reveals, getting class cards finally, but we do have one final neutral card, so that is Storm Giant. It's an epic, it's an 8 mana 8/8 with Taunt, and Forge costs 2 less, can be forged endlessly. That is right, you can spend 2 mana to forge it to make it cost 2 less. I guess you're essentially spreading out paying for the mana. It does seem weird to me, though, that you're gonna pay 2 mana to forge it to then make it cost 2 less. Doesn't feel like it's doing much. I don't know. Like, I guess if you have to save the cost in the long run. It has Taunt, so I guess that's like, it's a giant that has Taunt. Cool. Otherwise, I think you're gonna want to play this in a deck that really needs to make use of the forging mechanic or something like that, but I don't know. I mean, maybe if you get to pair this with the other neutral card that copies a forge card, like, sure, cool, then you can maybe have a bunch of cheap giants, and maybe there is a deck that tries to make that work, but beyond that, I'm sorry, I don't like it all that much. Time to get into some Death Knight cards. We had a good portion of these revealed by Trump SC in his video, and the reason that he kind of revealed all of these is that they are kind of not really a package, but they do work together on the same concept of these rune plagues. So each rune has its own plague. There's a blood plague, frost plague, and unholy plague. There are going to be cards that put these plagues into your opponent's deck. All 3 of these are cast when drawn and start with take 2 damage. So they are kind of like in Trump's video, he talks about the reminiscence of the old school kind of bomb warrior that put the bomb in your deck. But yeah, these are just some cheap things. Cast when drawn, starts with deal 2. The blood plague also will restore 2 to you if you put it in your opponent's deck. If it gets put into your deck and you draw it, then it will restore 2 to the enemy hero. The frost plague, again, dealing 2, and then it will make your next card cost 1 more. Now this increases, and this is only going to increase up to 10. It's not going to make anything cost more than 10. And the unholy one, after the 2 damage, will then summon a 2/2 undead for the opponent. So again, if you got this put into your deck and you draw it, your opponent's going to get a 2/2. If you put this into their deck and they draw it, you will get the 2/2 undead. Kind of an interesting thing. Now let's take a look at some cards that put these plagues into the deck or make use of these plagues here. And the first one is Staff of the Primus. Of course, Primus is the Titan for Death Knight. So we have the staff here. It's a 1 mana, 1 attack, 3 durability weapon, 2 unholy runes. After your hero attacks, shuffle a random plague into your opponent's deck. So it's going to be random between those 3 that we just saw, which gets shuffled in. All right, after your attacks, it's got 3 attacks. Sure, pretty straightforward. The next one is Distressed Valdir. It's a 2 mana, 2 unholy rune minion, 3 attack, 2 health, undead. With a Death Rattle, shuffle 2 random plagues into your opponent's deck. Okay, so a Death Rattle, so this is going to have to die off. It's only got 2 health, though. Should be pretty simple to kill this off. Aggressively statted. It seems fine if you want to go for these plagues. The next one is a dual rune type. It's 2 mana and costs 1 frost rune and 1 unholy rune, called Down with the Ship. It is a shadow spell. Deal 3 damage to a minion. If it dies, shuffle 2 random plagues into your opponent's deck. Okay, so does feel like a lot of kind of requirements going on with this. It's the dual rune type. You have to deal the damage to a minion, and then you only get the 2 random plagues into their deck if that minion dies. It does seem like kind of a lot to ask, but if there is a like Frost Unholy deck that wants to play these plague things, this seems like a really great option. But I don't expect it to be played like outside of that very specific deck. And then we have this awesome legendary Helia, which is a 1 unholy rune, 4 mana card. It's 4 attack, 4 health, and Battlecry. Shuffle all 3 plagues into your opponent's deck. Plagues they draw this game are unending. Now, in the video, Trump SC also mentioned that what that means, the unending, is when your opponent draws one of those plague cards, after it resolves, it will then shuffle back into the deck. So it doesn't go away and disappear like most, cast when drawn cards. It'll go off and then it just gets shuffled right back in again. So it just keeps going. Very, very interesting, especially since it's shuffling all 3. So some of the other cards are just, random plagues. This one, at least it will be all 3 in there. I'm not sure if there's going to really be a way for you to kind of set it up where you try to get certain ones if you just play Helia. I don't know. It seems all right. Then we have Tomb Trader, a 4 mana, 1 frost, 1 unholy rune, 4 attack, 3 health minion. With Battlecry, destroy a plague in your opponent's deck to deal 3 damage to all enemy minions. Okay, again, this does seem like it's asking a bit much. You do have to have put a plague in their deck. At least the upside, I do think, is that it's dealing damage only to their minions, so not your minions, which I do think is pretty significant. But again, this really kind of only goes in a deck that really wants to use these plagues. Of course, if you are playing a deck that utilizes these, I think this is a solid option. If you're wanting to play another type of Death Knight, they're not going to play this. And then we have this cool Chained Guardian. It's 11 mana with 1 unholy rune, 8 attack, 5 health, rush, and reborn. Costs 1 less for each plague shuffled into the enemy deck this game. So even if you draw this later game and you've been able to put things into their deck, those plagues into the deck, it's going to be much cheaper. The Reborn is pretty interesting since it also has Rush. So that is potentially 16 damage or clearing 2 large things, which that's pretty powerful on its own. But if you haven't played a lot of the cards to put plagues into your opponent's deck, this still could be pretty costly, and I'm not sure if there's going to be enough plague creation if you just play Unholy. You probably still might have to play Unholy and Frost and kind of play all of the cards. I don't know. This seems really flashy and really cool, but I want to see it in action before really deciding if this is great or not. But right now, it still seems costly, and that requirement to have put the plagues in their deck still seems a little high to me. These, honestly, all of these cards and the plagues on their own really just feel like they require a lot of setup, and you are really just banking on your opponent drawing those. So if there's a way to kind of force your opponent to draw some cards and kind of draw into these plagues, then sure, maybe that can help out. Or if they are a deck that just wants to draw through their deck really fast, I guess. But I don't know. They feel like something that's really cool, but I am hesitant to think that they are going to be something that is very powerful and kind of an entire win condition or entire deck type on its own. I don't honestly think that they're quite as strong as the Bomb Warrior kind of play. Dealing 5 damage every time was a huge hit. And I do think that decks now in the current meta often have a lot more survivability and ways to kind of deal with stuff like that. Unlike during the Bomb Warrior time frame. So I'm not sure if they're going to be quite as strong, but we'll see. Outside of all of those kind of cards that are packaged together for the plagues, the final 3 Death Knight cards were revealed via Hearthstone top decks article blog post here. The first one here is Frozen Over. It's a 2 mana, 1 frost rune, frost spell It says, both players draw 2 cards. Your opponent cannot play them next turn. Okay, so there is a way to potentially draw and maybe get your opponent to draw into some of those plagues. They're not being played anyways because they're cast when drawn. This does stop your opponent from playing those 2 cards that were drawn, which can potentially be some like key cards that they might have needed to play. For a lot of the decks, I think just kind of stalling for that 1 turn probably doesn't do terribly much. There is the potential of the draw for you being that much of an upside, but I'll really kind of want to see how this plays out. I kind of expect this to be a card that ultimately people just might take on discover options when they really, really like are desperate for draw, or potentially take it in a matchup where they could just be burning those cards for their opponent if their opponent's playing a deck that has a large hand size. Other than that, I don't think that this is something that's going to get played a ton or like slotted in, but who knows? We'll see. And then another 2 mana frost spell. Again, 1 frost rune requirement here. Northern Navigation. It says discover a spell from your deck. If it's a frost spell, freeze a random enemy minion. Discovering something from your deck seems pretty good. It's only 2 mana, so you're probably going to be able to do this pretty often. And you may likely actually be playing this in a full frost deck, in which case, then you're guaranteed for it to be a frost spell. Freezing a random enemy minion, really going to depend on the kind of board state, what deck you're playing against. Obviously, this is going to be a bit better against decks that kind of have only 1 or 2 minions that might be medium size or large kind of minions. And maybe not as good against decks that potentially go wide on the board or have like 1/1s and 2/2s. You probably don't really care about freezing one of those. Just the fact of discovering a spell from your deck might be good enough to want to run this. And then the last Death Knight card is Eulogizer. It's a 3 mana, 3/3 undead. Battlecry, spend 3 corpses to deal 3 damage. Forge, gain them instead. So the them here gaining is the corpses. Instead of spending corpses, you would gain 3 corpses to deal 3 damage, which that is absolutely bonkers. I think paying the 2 to forge this and then playing it for 3 mana to get a 3/3 that gives you 3 corpses and deals 3 damage seems very, very good. And because this doesn't have a rune requirement, you can play this in any type of Death Knight deck. Go play it in whatever you want. That seems pretty good. Plus, the dealing 3 damage is wherever you want to target that damage. That can go to an opponent minion, their face, wherever you want to send that damage. So I think this card is absolutely amazing. And honestly, even if you have to spend 3 corpses, during maybe the kind of earlier or mid game, as long as you have those corpses to play this, to try to deal 3 and remove something off your opponent's board, and then put the 3/3 on your board, that might be worth it in some cases too. So honestly, all around, I think that this card is fantastic. Well, what do you think of these cards and Death Knight overall? Are you kind of excited for this plague mechanic? Are you going to be trying it out? What type of Death Knight decks are you going to be theory crafting now that we have all the Death Knight cards? Let me know in the comments below. And if you did happen to miss any of the neutral cards that I went over, don't forget to click into this video next, and I'll see you in the next one.